Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, May the 31st. And welcome to our commentary. This is the end of May. The next time we chat will be in the month of June. I mean, this year is just flying by. I don't know if this is what happened last year, but I get the feeling this year is really flying by. I don't know about you guys. Well, today we're going to begin our commentary talking about a post that I have over at the American Thinker this morning. You know, normally I write about politics and current events, but today I wrote about sports and specifically Joe Namath, one of the most interesting personalities, sports personalities, really, of the last 50 or 60 years. Now, some of you may be familiar with Joe Namath because he does all of these Medicare television commercials. If you're not a baseball or football fan, that may be the way you know Joe Namath from the Medicare commercials. But once upon a time, Joe Namath, back in the 60s, was a young quarterback. He was born in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and he was born in 1943. So he turns 80 years old today, May 31st. But he was born there. He was a very good athlete, and in the end, he ended up playing quarterback at the University of Alabama back in the mid 1960s. That was a very good program, and it didn't take long for the football world to realize that Joe Namath had a great future. So when it came time to go into the pros, the natural thing to do for young quarterbacks at that time, or great football players at that time, was to sign with the National Football League, which is the established football league that had been around for a very long time. But Joe decided to go with the American Football League. Now, they gave him a ton of money, to be fair, to sign with what they used to call the AFL. The AFL had been around for about 5 years. They were trying to break into the football world, and they had signed a television contract with NBC, who was carrying their games on Sunday, and they were trying to establish themselves. And they decided to hire Joe and make him the face of the league. And Joe, of course, was a good looking guy. He was a good athlete. He was playing in New York. So he had everything going for him. And he was also a great quarterback. So Joe began playing, and the American Football League began to take off. And in 1969, January 1969, they had what we now call the Super Bowl. Back then, it was not called the Super Bowl. It was called the American versus National Football League Championship. And this was the third one. The first two had gone to Green Bay. This was the third one. And it was between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Jets. Now, the Colts were heavy favorites. They were a much better team. They were one of the great teams, really, in NFL history. But Namath beat the Colts. And then overnight, he became a huge sensation. And a year and a half later, the American League and the National League decided to become one, which is what we now have. The National Conference, the American Conference, that's what we have now under the banner of the NFL. But the person who made it all happen was Joe Namath, who's 80 years old today. Now, Namath was extremely popular with the young people. I was a huge fan of Namath when I was in school. The girls were madly in love with Joe Namath because he was, a good-looking guy, of course, and he was just a great personality. He was, I guess, maybe the first real television personality in football history. There were other great players at the time, of course, but he was such a dramatic. He was made for television, and that's exactly what he did. He became the big football player of that time. So Joe Namath is 80 years old. I hope he's doing well. Like some of you, I see him doing Medicare commercials. And, that's kind of funny watching him do Medicare commercials. But anyway, I guess that's what you do when you get old these days. So happy number 80 to Joe Namath, one of my all-time favorite football players and sports personalities. And, man, I remember watching the AFL, those great games between the Jets and the Raiders and the Chiefs. That was another great team from the AFL. And, of course, now they all play under the banner of the NFL. But back then they had two different leagues, and, NFL was on CBS, AFL was on NBC, and that's kind of how we grew up watching football in the late 60s, early 70s. So, again, happy number 80 to Joe Namath, one of my all-time favorites. Well, a lot of talk these days about woke companies and companies who have decided to, I guess, go woke. And in doing so, they've upset their client base. And some companies are actually suffering quite a bit. The beer company, the retail company, I don't want to get into their names, but you know who they are. The baseball team is also suffering. And that's because these organizations made a very big mistake. They didn't know their customers. But they made a bigger mistake than that, I think. Not knowing their customers was pretty big. But they made a big mistake, and that is assuming that people want to be, in your face politics 24/7. I think people are fed up with that. People are fed up with watching television and seeing politics in television commercials, seeing what they like to call virtue signaling, where every television commercial these days is a political statement. People don't want to watch that. They're saying, hey, don't give me that. I don't need that. I don't need that. I just want to watch the commercial. I'm going into Target to buy some things for my kids. Don't give me all that stuff in your face as Target was doing. I just want to buy some beer. Hey, don't give me that in your face kind of political statement. Then, of course, the worst case of all is the Dodgers in LA. I mean, it's a baseball team. What in the heck is a baseball team getting associated with all of this? And then they invite to the game one of the most obnoxious and anti-Catholic groups in the country. And there's these sisters or whatever their name is, who've made it a practice to mock and try to destroy Catholic monuments and sacraments. And they walk into them and they mock the Catholic faith. Well, these companies are paying a price, and a lot more companies are going to pay a price if they don't get their act together. People do not want to see this. They're fed up with this. They're tired of this. And if these companies don't get it, I guess more companies are going to suffer billions of dollars in losses. And frankly, if that's what it takes, then let it be. If that's what it takes, let it be. And if you're a CEO out there and you're trying to market your strategy for the next 12 months, and they come to you with all this woke stuff, maybe you should step back for a second and say, well, does that really fit us? Is that really what we need to be doing? And if you say yes, then you're going to end up losing money. If you say no, then you're going to keep your customers. It's simple as that. What an incredible situation, frankly, to watch these companies just commit suicide because they want to be woke. What a terrible tragedy that is. Well, it looks like we're going to have a few people coming into the Republican race. Vice President Pence, Governor Christie, former governor of New Jersey, he's going to be coming in. Not exactly sure what impact all of this is going to have. I guess in a way, it sort of helps President Trump, because the more candidates you have, the easier it is for Trump to win with 35-40% of the vote, as he did back in 2016. But I think a lot of these candidates will probably maybe go as far as New Hampshire or maybe some of the primaries at the very beginning, but I can't see them going very far. I just can't see them going very far. I'm not sure. I mean, Vice President Pence, I like him a lot. I think he was a very loyal vice president to President Trump. I know that there was a difference between them there at the end, which sort of soured their relationship. But I don't see him, frankly, making much of a entrance here. And Governor Christie even less. Now, I was a big fan of Governor Christie back in 2016. I thought he would be a very good candidate for president. And I continue to say I think he would make a heck of an attorney general, Governor Christie, that is. But I don't think these two men are going to have much of an impact on the race, because I think it's down to DeSantis and Trump. It's one of those two who will be the Republican nominee. I think everybody else, maybe they're fighting for the VP position. I don't think Pence would be a VP, nor Christie, but I certainly think Senator Tim Scott would be a very good VP. Well, once again, we're seeing the world going a little bit crazy. You have the president of Brazil, Lula. He goes to Venezuela and he gets together with the dictator of Venezuela, Maduro, and they have a love fest. You would think that, my goodness, these two guys have not seen each other for centuries. And, Lula is coming up with all kinds of excuses for Maduro in Venezuela. But here's the good part. Here's the good part of the story. A lot of leaders in South America and in Central America are standing up and saying no. President of Chile, I was happy to see that. The president of Chile said, no, come on, come on. This you have to know what's going on in that country. The president of Uruguay said the same thing. So it's good to see. It's good to see a reaction from some of the leaders of Latin America who don't like the glorification of Maduro in Venezuela. And shame on Lula. I don't know how else to say it. Shame on Lula for allowing himself to step into this. I mean, look, I understand that leaders don't want to get involved in the affairs of other countries. I get that. But don't go in there and make a martyr, out of Maduro, who is not a Democrat. He's not a person who has been very good for the country. In fact, he's been a dictator in every sense of the word. So what a mess. Shame on Lula. That's all I can say. Shame on Lula. Well, last but not least, I've got a post coming out about this Thursday morning, so check it out. But Jane Fonda, remember Jane Fonda? Well, she's at it again now. She's at it again. You can always count on Jane Fonda to say something stupid. Well, the latest bit of wisdom from Jane Fonda, she's blaming white people and racism for all the climate change problems. So it's basically the fault of white people, according to Jane Fonda. That's why we have climate change. Now, nobody, and it would be nice if somebody in the media would ask Jane Fonda about China. Are not exactly doing their best to work on climate change. In fact, those two countries, particularly China, they're polluting their atmosphere at a rapid rate, but nobody will challenge the Chinese. I guess maybe Jane Fonda doesn't want to say something negative about the Chinese. Maybe they will pull her videos and her films out of circulation in China. Maybe that's why she doesn't want to say anything. But she did say some things about white people and racism and climate change. She ought to be embarrassed, and there ought to be people calling her out, but they won't. They won't. There's such a double standard in this stuff. It's pretty sickening. So thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and one more time, happy number 80 to Joe Namath, Broadway Joe, as they used to call him. Bye-bye, everybody.